Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica O'Brien, and I'm Catherine and Jody's child. And I've been recruited to do an introduction. We're glad to see all of you out here tonight on this rainy night. A little bit about each of them. Catherine O'Brien is the author of a chapbook, The Servant's Vitamins, with poems from the White Nightgown. She holds an MA in writing poetry from UNH, where she studied with Charles Simic and McKeel McBride. She retired after working 23 years at the Arts in Education and Arts and Health Coordinator in the New Hampshire State of the Council on the Arts, and now teaches poetry classes at Twiggs Gallery and other places. Her poems have been published in numerous journals. Her White Nightgown manuscript, which includes poems from The Servant's Vitamin, was the recipient of the UNH Graduate Writing Program's Thomas Williams Award. Most recently, her poem, In a Pelican Dream, was published in Literary North's online journal, and her poem, You Cannot Escape. That's enough. Another interesting fact that I used to go to classes with her is she's taught English as a second language for adults in Manchester, New Hampshire. So I even remember going to those classes with her. It's pretty cool. And Jody Wells has been writing poems since high school. His poems have been published in Off the Coast, Concrete Wolf, the Bradford Bridge, and other journals. Most recently, his poetry has been included in the Visual Verse 1, 2, 3, and 4 publications of the Literary Arts Guild Center for the Arts, Sunapee region. He can be seen pulling a small cannon in Sutton's 4th of July parade, and often found at the Davisville Flea Market and farmers markets in the region. He's known for selling dog bones.
That's enough.
Catherine and Jody live in one of the oldest houses in the village of South Sutton with their dog Tasha, the little black fox. Between them, they have 9 grandchildren, ages 1 to 25. All right, good luck.
Thanks, Jess.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun trying to organize a reading with your husband. We decided we're each going to read first 5 poems, and they're going to be about our growing up and aspects of our childhood. So I think there's a lot of narrative storytelling, which I think will be fun for you. And I also wanted to thank the Center for the Arts, Sunapee Region, for hosting these readings. The Literary Arts Guild, that's doing wonderful work to get literary arts of all kinds out into this region. And I hope everyone supports them. So the following poems are about my growing up in the Philippines. And this is my chapbook. If anyone would like one, I did not bring them to sell tonight, but let me know and we can make arrangements for that. So I grew up in Manila for the most part. And the title of these poems is Lucky to be Born in a House of Milk. Raise your hand if for any reason you can't hear us, so we know, because there's no mic here. The Servant's Vitamins. Every morning, my mother ordered the servants to line up for vitamin pills by the mahogany headboard. When Lloyd and Rufa moved out, my mother found hundreds of yellow pills swarming with ants, small hills of one a day beneath the houseboy's sagging mattress. And This poem is for Pasing. And I have a dedication at the beginning of this book, not only to my sister and brother, but also to the servants I grew up with, who I feel gave me a lot of the language for these poems. And a lavandera is someone who does laundry. That's the job. Pasing. Pasing, our lavandera, never smiled. Still, my mother likes to tell me, Pasing had a wonderful life. But I always wondered why Pasing never married, why she smoked a cigar all day long, chewed it, pressing the hot, dark roll of tobacco upon her bottom lip. I used to watch her wash, iron, sweep, smoke, and balance the cigar, watch the ashes tremble and fall onto my mother's silk slips. Pasing would spit on the iron, frown, and brush the ashes away, rub the leftover ashes into the cloth with her thumb. Smoke darkened the windowless room. The stub small burn of light glowed like a filling between her yellow teeth. I wondered what she thought of as she stared for hours at the crucifix on the laundry room wall, or the picture of baby Jesus in Mary's lap, surrounded by bluebirds, angels, and lambs, so white they looked like they'd been soaked for days in bleach. I hunched in the corner, kept away from her feet, counted cockroaches crawling across the gray cement walls, hoping to hear her gossip with the gardener or tell crude stories about the Quiapo markets, beggars and thieves. Then she would mutter old and Asian warnings under her breath. I watched her eyes, and sometimes breathing a sigh of hot, foul smoke, Pasing would sit down on her cot, remove her slippers, remove her sweaty dress, slowly rub each foot with cocoa butter, half-heartedly swat me away, throwing curses at me with a dusty slipper. She cursed God, cursed her calloused feet, cursed the rains that never stopped, cursed the sagging cot, cursed the sun, cursed the flies on the wall, cursed the high price of fish, cursed my mother, cursed the iron, cursed the fat cook and the lazy houseboy, cursed her wrinkled face, her sagging shoulders, the bony crooked toes, cursed her sleepless nights and the piles of dirty laundry, blaming the midday heat, blaming my evil upbringing, threatening me with blood of the Virgin Mary's womb, Polynesian gods and Chinese devils. She promised me that if I was a bad girl, that if I was a wild and godless child, naked robbers with greasy skin would slip into my bedroom and cut off my sucking thumb with bolo knives. Roaches and rats with tails as long as typhoons would steal me from my bed, tie me up, bite out my eyes, and send me in an old suitcase to Borneo. Still, I stood by the door, stayed all day if I could, to watch Pasing push the heavy iron, starch our party dresses, smoke her cigar, and kill horseflies with bloody slaps of her slipper. I stayed to hear the curses of her fierce old tongue, to learn the swears by heart, shriller, more savage than I had ever heard from the mouth of a woman. I stayed to watch her kill each horsefly that landed on the cuffs of my father's white shirts. Now, we weren't really supposed to go in the servants' quarters, but of course we did. We would go down there and wanted to be down there, sometimes with playing with our children too. So an ama, you may have heard that word before. An ama is an Asian nurse, or governess. And this is about one of my amas. Just so you know, the word corazon means heart in Spanish. So corazon. My ama Corazon was a dwarf. On her day off, she would take a long jeepney ride to the other side of Manila. On her day off, she visited her crazy naked husband in the mental hospital. On her day off, she brought her husband candy, fish, and rice wrapped tight in banana leaves, new clothes, and Camel cigarettes. During the week, while she mothered us, his food and clothes, the candy and cigarettes would be stolen. On her day off, I used to watch Corazon wash her shiny black hair. I loved to watch her braid it down to her knees. By the time I turned 10, I was taller than my ama. On her day off, after the communion mass, Corazon would fill her market bag and bring her crazy naked husband candy, mangoes, Camel cigarettes, and a new pair of pants. Years later, my mother told me she was my #1 girl. She spent all her wages on her husband. In the provinces, only a crazy man would marry a dwarf. And this title is The Ama's Warning. When I was a child, my ama gave me a nipa broom to brush the dust off my feet. My ama told me if I let it go too far, the soul decays, the skin bleeds, my small white toes would disappear one by one into the Asian moon's frayed bag of bones and suckling thumbs. So this will be the last one I read from this part of our reading. And it's, I think, kind of interesting how I grew up on totally the other side of the world than Jody, and what different childhoods we had. It's fun to think about that sometimes. A little bit of a longer poem, but the ama for Rufa. Pray the rosary, pray the blood, pray the robe, pray the sensing angel smoke that floats to me, first sip of blood, wafer light on a child's tongue. My ama taught me how to pray the rosary beads. When you touch the Madonna's robe, be still, bend down on one knee. When you touch the holy robe, be still in the dark. Don't look in her eyes. My ama's name was Rufa. She wore a gold cross and a white cotton dress. I remember the smell of her, the smell of the servants' quarters, raw soap and starch. I remember her turning the belt over, threatening my father's belt into a whip. Her brown hands serving freshly ironed dresses. Her quiet Catholic hands bringing silver trays of forgiveness, mangoes and papayas, brownies and milk. At birthday parties, she stood behind my chair, behind the balloons. She wore a gold cross and her long, thick braids smelled of fish and rice and coconut oil. I remember her voice that spoke the island dialects, English and Spanish, telling me to be a good girl, telling me that if I lay still as a shadow in siesta, if I pretended sleep like an obedient secret, folded between the air-conditioned sheets, she would take me for jeepney rides into the beggar streets of Manila, into the muddy alleys of lepers, albinos, and naked children, into the Quiapo market, into the coves where fish hawkers cried, Balut, balut, into the bat caves of the blue virgin mothers where martyrs and thorn saints stared like owls from the sweaty stone. Out of the Asian heat, my Amma would lead me hushed by the hand through the pulsing wings of white candles. My Amma would cover my head with grace, drape my head and eyes with her black lace shawl, teach me how to cross myself twice before miracles. Kiss the feet with your eyes closed, kiss the wounds. My Amma showed me how to kneel deep in the cathedral aisles, how to sit beside her stillness, how to wait inside the black veil, pray the rosary, pray the blood on the robe, pray the sensing angel's smoke that floats to me, first sip of blood, wafer light on a child's tongue. So thank you. And we are going to move now to this region, to the area of Sutton and Bradford. And when we looked back at our poems about childhood, it was fun to look at that. And Jody's are sort of chronological from looking back at what, 4 or 5 years old. And then you'll hear where they end up at about age, what, 18 or 19. So,
Welcome, everyone. And yes, my poems are a little different, but hopefully you'll enjoy them. This one is an early one. This is called Coming Home from the Bradford Women's Club Fair. Chickens surround him with frantic heads going this way or that. I ran to him with my blue balloon, he with outstretched arms and I mine. The balloon rose, it cast a shadow that moved across the pen. The birds went berserk, bunched in a corner, pushed their heads through the wire until they bled. Our moment was lost. This is called Spring Ritual. When the sap finishes its last dark run and the frost heaves started to settle just before black flies, Oscar French stops by. My father has just finished his poached eggs. Oscar was in our doorway, blade, shears in hand. I knew then it was time for our sheep to lose their winter coats. Once a year, he spreads out his denim tarp and straddles the first ewe with her head between his knees. He gracefully flips her on her back to shear her underbelly, then frees her to run off into the field. As my father patiently leads the last bleeding Dorset to be shorn, when it's time for a break, Oscar stretches on his back to rest his sturdy shoulders and neck. The clouds all look like sheep in the sky. Oscar scoops the fleece from his tarp and stuffs it into a burlap bag. My favorite part of this ritual is when he breaks for lunch. He pulls out a meatloaf sandwich wrapped in wax paper. has a sip of coffee from his thermos, and checks his pocket watch. When lunch is over, he pulls out his false teeth and gives me a toothless grin. No nicks, not a speck of blood. This was about dancing class, and it's called The Stroll. The town hall lights shed snow as we walk through the double doors in itchy wool pants, hands at my throat to relieve my father's forehand or Windsor knot. Inside, we sit linked together in wooden chairs and unbuckle galoshes, chirping rubbers on the hardwood floor. It is sixth grade. Who has smokes? Who just farted? Who is cool? Strolling into the boys' room, we share drags and Ricky Salmon's dirty deck of cards. The six of diamonds, a naked blonde pinup kneeling, her hands in her hair. Someone has made her nipples large with a teacher's red pencil. It is Friday night dancing class. First hour, Mrs. West, the box step, foxtrot, polka, Mexican half dance. Second hour with Chubby Checker, the stroll, mashed potatoes, the twist. Girls lined up whispering in white and pink, powder blue, puffy chiffons. The back of my neck burns as I stroll across the floor through the gauntlet of eyes towards Sandy Messer for the spotlight dance. This one is pretty familiar because it's in New London. Everyone knows the Red Boathouse is the name of this poem. Everyone knows the Red Boathouse at the hairpin along 103A, built on granite ledge and appearing upside down in the lake. It's been in the family for years. Hardly a ripple on Sunapee and Harrod Cove. The leaves against the pine and hemlock are gold and almost at peak. This time of year, there is nothing moored. The canoes have all been put up and the old wooden Chris-craft retired for the season. This morning, after the rain last night, Freddie Fletcher, late for school, rolled his mother's new VW convertible on that curve and only missed first period in English. And I think if I can get it open here. Yeah, I can get it. There we go. There we go. The induction, 1968. The induction notice began. Greetings. That night we sat in our living room, listening to Alice's restaurant, laughing together nervously, while upstairs my mother took her bath. A few weeks later, before I went off to basic training, my father told me, when you go on liberty, whatever you do, don't get a tattoo. They are on for good, no matter what you do. That was it. Thank you.
So just a couple of comments on that. The dance class was in the Bradford Town Hall, and Jody still has a photo of himself, an old little black and white photo of himself dancing with Sandy Messer. And she's this blonde, quite a bit taller than he is, a head taller. Also, his poem about the Red Boathouse is part of a series that the Literary Arts Guild has been doing. And they published a series of wonderful books of photographs and different themes. So that was in the theme. The book is The Ripple Effect, and you can get it at the Lake Sunapee Preservation Society. So that theme for that book was all these things relating to Lake Sunapee and the watershed and beyond. And Jody took the Red Boathouse to a new place, which was very fun. So I'm going to do one poem that is, we're moving now a little more into our adulthood. So these were poems from when we became adults and about that. And I went through a phase of writing white nightgown poems. I think I wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and ended up with a manuscript thanks to the Vermont Studio Center. So this is the only, I'm just going to give you a taste of the white nightgown poem. So this is the first opening poem for the white nightgown poems, and it's called History. Somewhere the worm is turning. My Amma irons the white nightgown. This is the only way to kill the tsetse fly's eggs. My sister plays strip poker in the white nightgown. My father bought it for me in Hong Kong. He bought it from a crone. The crone was carved of mammoth bone. She was carrying 100 white nightgowns on her back. My grandmother tried to drown it in the well. My mother stole it from under my pillow. My mother gave it to the lavandera. Passing the lavandera scrubbed it with Felsnapsa soap and bleach. She scrubbed it so hard with a stone, it disappeared into the muddy perfume river. And the perfume river became a very well-known river in Vietnam, where a lot of soldiers actually died. And anyone remember Felsnapsa soap? Yes. I can't even say it. It's very difficult, but they used a lot of it then. Very difficult to, yeah. How many of you write poetry? Does anyone write poems here? Yeah, quite a few. Good, excellent. I like that. I like that. So later in college, I was very lucky to go to the University of Barcelona in Spain for a year and travel a little. And I went through my Frida Kahlo phase. Some of you know who Frida Kahlo is? Yeah, the artist, very strong portraits. So Frida's bathing song. Swimming is lonely on winter nights. You know I love to think about you in the dark. Water lilies, snow bluffs, Ortega. I scrawl your name across the white walls. Querida. I listen to the water's dark pulse, the slow, lovely drudgery of dusk through the milk pod trees. Shy girls slip away beneath the waves. A gardener is dancing in his sleep. Mermaids glide by my boat wearing slippers made of salt. Agua. I wanted to write about the clouds in mirrors. I loved him because he had a gift, the ability to fade. I loved him because he could make the bed sing like an angel, and no one knew the mouth of the river like him. So last 3 years, we've been going down to Alabama. Everyone goes, why are you going to Alabama? And we really loved it down on the Gulf Coast. And you're going to hear Weeks Bay maybe in one of these. So I wrote a poem for the pelicans that we watched all day long. So in my pelican dream, for Isabel Garza Walker, that's my niece. And I have a quote from the artist Walter Anderson. It is approaching the magic hour before sunset when all things are related. I was born without feathers, down by the fish houses, a water bird with a long brown bill, an orange pouch of translucent skin, scooping up clouds and small fish, sometimes a carp. Traveling with my flock, I could glide long distances along the coasts of my imagination. You fell in love with my webbed feet and waterproof feathers. I spoke the mysterious language of mermaids and blue heron. My favorite foods, anchovies, frogs, and snakes. When I arch my head way back to swallow, the fish river light comes through me. How I love to stretch out 8 feet of wing over the Tensaw Delta swamps. Humans call me ungainly. Still, I fly with my own certain grace, landing on the pier cross, swooping down from up high, almost without a sound, to balance, each eye open wide and bright, set inside a ring of black seashells, set on each side of my head, holding the curved, slender neck, poised above the waves, waiting and watching for the magic hour. And that was kind of a fun assignment Literary North did, where they asked poets to seed the poem. So they asked you to take a line from another poet or writer or artist and use it in your poem. And the line I used, down by the fish houses, comes from a very famous poem by Elizabeth Bishop about the fish houses that she wrote. So that was kind of fun to do. And it is more important than ever that the Literary Arts Guild is here, because Literary North, which served Maine, Vermont, the Upper Valley, has shut down. So a group of graduate students from Dartmouth started it and did a fabulous job, but they've shut it down. So a lot of great, and you can still look at their website. So this is another Alabama poem. And if everything goes well with our reading, we're hoping that we left maybe 5 minutes or so for questions at the end. So you cannot escape. You cannot escape Jesus or the cross here in southern Alabama. His name is painted 10 feet high on the dumpster at Billy's Seafood in Bon Secours. He's on the walls, the soap dish and menus in the Biscuit King, home of the ugly biscuit. In Weeks Bay, there's a cross made of old pier wood with laughing gulls flashing their silver white wings until a passing cloud becomes a white heron. Swoop and fall, swoop and rise above the pier cross. It's a miracle that they have returned. And then 3 double-breasted cormorants arrive to perch on each point of the cross. They spread their bat-like wings to dry until they turn to dark waves on a high wind night. When I turn and look again, a young sea eagle poises high on a southern pine. My heart is at high tide, flying, looking for a prayer, hungry, searching, always hungry. And when I shared that with one of my writing groups, they all wanted to see the ugly biscuit. And it is a real place, and the biscuits were like this big. Someone said to me, how did you in that poem suddenly shift from Jesus to the birds? But I did learn that some wonderful birds have returned since the oil spills, and that was very hopeful to me, that to be seeing that happening. So this will be my last poem, and this is a really new poem. It's still kind of fresh. So 108th Old Home Day, August 2022 in South Sutton, New Hampshire. Yay. And when I moved here, I was in Southern New Hampshire. I had no idea what Old Home Day was. And it took me a while to figure it out. And it was so born and bred into him for generations. He's like, he grew up in the house we live in. So a quote, bless us and give us the joy to continue dancing. And this is for the Reverend Dick Dutton. Yesterday, I saw the minister struggle to get down on his hands and knees on the worn brown carpet by the podium. He bathed the feet of his old friend, 1 foot at a time, using a small copper bowl and cloth. It was quiet in the meeting house, flow of sunlight through prism glass windows. A bee slipped in the open doors. I felt the awkward tenderness of the minister's shaky hands. Something inside me shifted and the clouds changed their shapes. After he dried his friend's feet with a cloth, the minister, who now uses ski poles to walk, needed help from his friend to rise up again. All of us holding our breath. I can't remember much of the sermon details, something about power and humility. I will never forget the sight of him washing his friend's feet. A stillness settled in the meeting house, flow of sunlight through the vases of hydrangeas and baby's breath on every windowsill. Only a few dozen of us gathered. Have you ever washed a stranger's feet? Have you ever washed a friend's feet? The atmosphere was changed. The organist and choir suspended in time. We were there. We saw it together. Did it make you nervous? The simple act of kindness and acceptance between one man and another. We held our breath until the minister broke bread for us all. He read his favorite psalm, inviting us to sing praises with tambourines and dance with each other in the old meeting house. One of the things that really struck me is maybe it's like this in other small towns. Every year people bemoan not enough people are coming to the Old Home Day service. And I was just so struck, even with a small group, something really significant can happen that changes you, that can make a difference in your life. So I'm to Jody.
So I wrote a poem about my neighbor's rooster beak. And that's what he called it. Anyway, crook beak. Alone, perched on a rafter, he stares down at cubbies where his speckled hens once nested behind tiny curtains. The neighbor's solo rooster, crookbeak, now silenced and sullen by the silver fox, he took away the last hen in this house, chicken feathers at the edge of the brook. This one is called Turkey Soup. All week long, it waits in the fridge, an unfinished carcass of bones and skin. I peek at it from time to time, the way I did that thankful day when it sat, legs tied, all proud and plump in the oven, golden brown and oozing stuffing. I remember my mother this time of year, her stock pot perched on the wood stove, crowded with drumsticks, onion peels and celery stalks, with a few bay leaves floating on top. When it starts getting dark early, the house begins to take on a flavor of its own. I start by closing window drapes and lighting candles, bringing the outside in with evergreens and snow-covered boots, then start a fire in the fireplace to watch the sparks and smoke come alive and then die in the hearth. House wren. I think I wrote this one for my father. They have returned for another year, standing guard on the old roof of his home, the tiny blue-headed wren. My father watched their activity while eating breakfast on his back porch, pointing out the marsh marigolds in the field. You can eat those, you know. He loved the spring's pale greens mixed with the dark evergreens on Meeting House Hill, the small umbrellas of maples and the forsythia in flames. To him, a late wet spring snow was never a nuisance, only nature's way of pruning the trees and fertilizing the fields. He knew where all the Indian fireplaces and burial grounds were hidden. And he knew that he could trust in me to place him where he wished under the pasture pine. And this is the last poem I'll read. And it was in one of the books also. And it's called Last Ride Up Meeting House Hill. And it's about a hearse that's on the stage of the Sutton Town Hall, an old hearse that sits there on the stage. So that was a photo in the book. Anyway, Last Ride Up Meeting House Hill. No one knows the next ride could be you in the black hearse with the yellow fringe and tassels draped over velvet drawn curtains, always parked in the dark end of Johnson's barn. In her stall, across from the hearse, Lucy, the retired mare, waits alone. When it's time, she wears an ostrich plume, pulling the carriage slow and steady with its pine casket and massive iron wheels through the village of Sutton, up Meeting House Hill to the Old South Cemetery. It might be Mrs. Ferry who is the next one to go. The 97-year-old woman who lives on Baker road and holds the Boston Post cane made of ebony with an engraved golden knob. Although the last time I saw her, she was on a stepladder painting her kitchen ceiling. Thank you very much.
What time is it now?
6:20.
Okay. If anyone has any questions and answers, I actually had another new poem I wrote about us and our marriage called Secrets of a Marriage, and he didn't want me to read it. You want me to read it? All right. He said, I've been experimenting with this a lot, and
It needs work.
it needs work, but it's fun.
All marriages need.
So
All you have to do is call it a draft.
that's right. And I think some of you may have read that the wonderful poet Wes McNair introduced us. So it was pretty amazing, yeah. And I just heard Gary was saying they were introduced through Wes. He's a little matchmaker. But all right, it's not as exciting as the title. Okay. So the title, and Wes was an influence on this poem because he's written quite a few poems, love poems for his wife. And I loved how he said, you know, people don't value a long-term marriage. What does it mean to be in a long-term marriage? You know, I was thinking about that. And so this is titled for now, Intimacy, Secrets of a Long Marriage. And we'll end on this. Only we know the two double-breasted cormorants, bat wings spread out shining to dry in the pier cross, are in Weeks Bay every morning, 6 a.m. The mysterious place the blue heron lands on our little beach at twilight in the crook of a sagging willow. How the little beach reveals itself, then disappears into brackish water. When the wrens will enter the birdhouse, how it sways up high on its pole in the smoky autumn winds, and the last hummingbirds visit before heading south. Where the robins made a nest on the narrow ledge above the front door that no one ever uses. How we stopped for the wood turtles, lined up, lazy, slow-moving dark circles, sunning on their 6-foot-long log, half in, half out of the Magnolia River. Only you and I were there when Bailey treed the young bear in the tall pine right by our driveway. Nothing to do but shake our heads and laugh out loud. Last winter, there was the noisy field mouse who moved into the old shaker cupboard that once belonged to your Aunt Betty. How it snuck in through a hole the size of a thimble, leaving its tiny footprints by the ripped bag of flour. The forgotten name of the little brook that runs by the Bayabrook cottage with its uneven pattern of rocky overflow and drought. Or when the back field needs mowing down to the Lane River, overgrown come late fall, time to call Jerry and his tractor for a visit. There's the bonfire pile that keeps growing, now 8 feet tall, full of old chairs and down limbs. One cold and rainy day in the spring, there will be a fire, tall and fierce as our love. How I help you dress up every year, last minute, in the old Santa outfit that smells like candy canes and dusty sweat, your beard half falling off. How you jingle up to the meeting house, pillows sagging under the wide black belt. The way you make your mother's potato salad every 4th of July. How you know her recipes by heart and keep your favorite pelican hat close by. Sometimes it's rough, like the back shed with the shaky rafters, where the roaming feral cat gave birth to a litter of 3 black kittens. The tiny one with crippled legs couldn't walk. And only we know why we kept your father's blue jean jacket on a peg in the entryway, and my mother's letters to my father when he was in prison camp. How close the lightning came one night to the old sugar maples, 4 wedding maples planted in a row beside our house. The secret names we gave ourselves, and how the little black fox greets you every morning with happy paws. Coming out on a rainy night like this and being such good listeners. Really fun. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you for inviting us into your visual, very visual poetry. It's just
Good.
you've been so many places through your words. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Fun to tell stories that way. And yeah. So we did really want to get you out on time. I said that would be something we do. I don't know if any of you have been to the South Sutton Meeting House lately. You have. It's been completely just renovated, and old glass in all the windows. It's so beautiful. It really is. Did any of you know Jody's parents, George and Martha? Yes. Oh, good. Oh. And you can see one thing very fun about being married to Jody is he's an excellent cook. He learned a lot from his mother. And I just want to give a shout out to Sally, Jody's sister, who's watching up in Maine. Hi, Sally.
Hi, Sally.
And Paul. Everybody say hi.
Ask a question?
Yeah.
It's maybe a common question, but I'm curious right now. When each of you found yourself identifying as a writer, I mean, was it early on as a child? Did you both enjoy writing? Maybe they're 2 separate questions. Did you both enjoy writing when you were very young? And it seems as though you would get to a point where you would say, I really value writing and I'm a writer or something.
Go ahead, Jim.
I really didn't, I don't think I really began writing that much until high school. And McNair was really the catalyst that got me going. You know, he'd give me books and different things. And I had this book that he gave me. It didn't have a covering, but it had a bunch of poems in it and written. I hope this book will help kindle your flame. I'll never forget that. But yeah, that's when I really got, and we had a school newspaper. So that's when, you know, we could put poems in the paper, in the school paper.
You should receive an award for having inspired many high school students.
Yeah, you got me through high school, basically. Yeah.
Did you enjoy working with a Simic?
I did. I totally did. And I think we both had been very lucky with our teachers, and both Charles Simic and McKill McBride, who couldn't have more different voices and styles and ways of teaching. And yeah, Charles Simic had a very European approach and surreal. You'll see probably the influence a little bit in some of my work, but yeah, that was a really a huge honor to do that. He was very kind and generous, very kind and generous. And I started writing in little journals and books when I was about probably 9 or 10 years old. And I went to the American school in Manila, but I saw a great deal of life, as you can tell, in the streets, going into and out of Manila. And so for a while, I haven't really written it more, but I've got quite a series looking back on my perspective on what it was like to be raised by the servants and my amas. There's a photo in here in the book that shows you a photo of Rufa. And I have such a different view now. I have such a different opinion on everything than my mother did, as you could tell. But she actually brought one of our amas to the United States with us to help take care of us. And I always wondered, you know, what happened to her children that she left. She was very lonely, very cold here in New England. And so I had a lot of, later in life, I kept asking my mother questions, you know, did Rufa or Pasing get a day off? I would ask things like that, and it was difficult. But yeah, I shared that upbringing with my sister. I started writing in little journals, and I think one of the first poems I wrote was kind of a wail to God about why are some children so poor. And I was very upset as well by the way the horses were treated and animals were treated in the streets at that time. It was just pretty rough, you know, a lot of poverty there, that I also did get to travel through Southeast Asia, which was really interesting to do. But now I'm writing about Old Home Day. And I don't think Dick Dutton knows about that poem yet. He might know. And no one else was ready for what he did either. I don't think anyone knew what he was like. His friend
Bob Wright
was Bob Wright, who's our selectman and president of the Southern Historic Society. And I think it was really an important piece in my poem that he accepted it, the way he accepted it. And he knew, I think he was the only one who knew that was going to happen. And it was fun to talk a little bit with both of them about it. Well, I hope you all keep writing. There's someone here who's been in my poetry classes for wonderful classes, several years in the Twig Gallery. And I know the Literary Arts Guild will be offering other readings coming up and lots of other really fun things. These books you can find at Main Street Bookends. If anybody wants one, you probably all know about them. And Morgan Hill has them too. So, here as well. And they're in here too. So we each, both of us have a poem in each of the books. And the new book coming up is a theme around farms and farming.
Rooted in New Hampshire.
Rooted in New Hampshire. So thank you too to the New London Inn. Thank you so much for filming this and making it easy for us. So have a glass of wine.
Thank you.